And the next session is just for you, a dialogue session with great people around. And the session is titled, What Investors Really Think. And it's my pleasure now to invite the following panelists to the head table on stage. Sanjeev, Shah, Managing Director above Specturm, via Specturm. Murli, Ravi, Head of South Asia JAFCO Investments. Ravi, Mantha, Incoming Chairman of Thai Singapore. Amit, Anand, Managing Director, Jungle Ventures, and Roshni Mitani, CEO, Tickle Media. Roshni will be moderating the session, so please feel free to ask questions, raise your hands, let us know your names, and then please post the questions or feedback.
Sure. I'm just going to put on the... Okay, so how it's going to work for today is we're going to start off first with me asking the investors some questions and allowing them to introduce themselves and what businesses they invest in. And then we'll be opening it up after 20 minutes of questions and answers to the public to ask 10 minutes of questions. Yeah, thanks. Okay, so we're going to first start by asking you to introduce yourselves and to describe yourselves as an investor. So if you had to use one word, what word would you use to describe yourself? Shall we start off with Sanjeev?
Emotional.
Okay, so Sanjeev, maybe you want to tell us a little bit about yourself.
Well, I moved from Bangalore to Singapore in 2007. I've been here 5 years now. That's when I joined BF Spectrum as a partner with William Clipkin, who you just heard earlier, and we've done some investments together. So I can say I've learned a little bit about investing in these 5 years, and I'd be happy to share what I've learned with you guys.
Okay, so your word is emotional.
Yeah.
Okay.
I think my word would be dispassionate. Dispassionate as an investor.
Okay.
Yeah, I look at it completely differently. I'm not looking at a company as, would I be the consumer or would I even understand the business model from a fashion standpoint? But I'm just looking to see if it will deliver the return. It's very mechanistic almost, the way I look at it. My background is very much in investing. I was a fund manager. The last 10 years I was managing a global equity fund, an emerging market equity fund for Fidelity Investments, which is one of the largest mutual fund companies in the world. So I retired from that last year to focus mainly on social impact and angel investing. So at Fidelity I had, my portfolio had 480 stocks, so I used to spend my entire time meeting CEOs and CFOs of companies, like 4 or 5, sometimes more every day. So I have a sense of different models of investing, and from there I learned that there is no one formula, there is no one answer. Sometimes you can have a complete fool who is a CEO, but who's running a company that is in a fantastic business, in a fantastic space, and those companies make a lot of money. And other times you have incredibly passionate and driven CEOs who just are in a space that's that's being, the ground is being pulled under out from under their feet, and they can't do anything about it. So it's really, I think the essence is to focus on where the business is in its in its growth and in its potential, and just invest on that basis. So that's my experience.
So my name is Murli. So I'm with JAFCO Investments, which is headquartered here in Singapore. We're a relatively early stage VC, but not as early as guys like William and Sanjeev and Amit as well. But we're early in the sense of we're not doing $10-15 million checks. So I've been with them for 4 years, and I was with a completely different company, also doing investments of a slightly different magnitude at a large government-backed fund before this. So anyway, my word for you is hardworking.
Okay.
But it doesn't mean successful, it just means hardworking.
Thanks, Roshni. So I have been in Singapore since 2000, and I've been since associated with startups. I've always been one of the first few employees in startups. I have also done a startup of my own in 2006 and exited in 2009. Even when I was with corporates, I was always involved in new businesses. So, I find the 0 to 2 million most exciting. From 2 to 100 million, you lost me. I think the one word probably that describes me or Jungle at this stage probably is learning.
Right, so we have emotional, we have dispassionate, we have hardworking, and we have learning. I happen to think that those 4 qualities are also what entrepreneurs should be having. So interesting there. But before we go on any further, I want to talk to you guys about business plans. Because business plans is basically the heartbeat of a company. I can't come to you without having an idea or without having a business plan. So in what format should a business plan be? I mean, do you want us to give it to you in a Word document? Do you want a PowerPoint, video slides? What kind of business plans do you want? Sanjeev, would you like to start?
Well, if I'm being sent something on email just to read initially to pique my interest, I don't want it to be more than 2 pages at the most. And of course, if you're coming in to present and I'm spending 15 minutes or half an hour with you, then ideally I wouldn't like to see more than 6 or 8 slides. So I think it's very important that you describe the product very clearly, the product and service. I've been in pitches where at the end of half an hour I still have no idea what the product is, and it's very hard to go any further. So please, first of all, make sure when you're pitching to investors, think of them as 5-year-olds and explain the product as you would explain it to a 5-year-old. Very clearly what it does. Make sure they get that in the first slide. Only then move further. So the other things I like to see is, everyone talks about a 50 billion market, and if the market is 2 billion or 1 billion, that's enough for me. I don't care whether it's 1 billion or 50 billion. Because you're not going to become 1 billion in the next 3 years anyway. So what's important is describe the product very clearly, describe your team, that's very important, describe very, very conservative financials, and not so much on the revenue side for me, because I know for sure you have no idea what the sales in the 3rd year or 5th year is going to be, and any number you put on is a number that you've picked from the air. So what's very important is the expense side for me. How minimal can you keep your expenses the first 2 years? Because that's what I'm going to look at. And I think if you can just keep it very real, very basic, that's what I'm looking for. I'm not looking for these fantastic figures that sound very impressive, or I'm not looking for other businesses that have exited at these big numbers. I see people coming and saying, oh, Facebook was sold for 100 billion. So what are you trying to tell me your business is going to sell for 1/10 of that? That doesn't impress me, So keep it very real and stick to the basic facts.
Murli, would you agree with that as well?
So I think it's definitely valid for him.
Because early stage.
Not just early stage, I think it's also time horizons are different, the investment structure is different. And I'll just explain for people who aren't really aware. So unlike the gentleman here, I'm not wealthy. I'm an employee just like everybody else in this room. So I've got investors to answer to myself, right? So people give us money to manage because they think we can make a return, and it's my duty to make a return for them and earn my keep. So given that, I can only make certain kinds of investments as, for example, Ravi, what you talked about earlier, things like 25% IRR and so on. But it also means that time horizon must matter, as William was saying. It also means that I might specialize, for example, in high tech, but I may be completely clueless about the agriculture market. So if you come and talk to me about agriculture, just because I don't know about it, I'm not going to invest. It's very straightforward. Or my investment agreement with my investors may preclude me from investing in that, so on and so forth. So I would say, know your investor, know what they focus on, know what stage they come in at, no, I actually like it when somebody comes into my office and says, I want this from you, which is not just the check saying so many dollars, right? Because that tells me you've done your homework. It tells me very clearly why we should work with you, why you should work with us. It's a two-way street. I'm not the right person for, or my fund is not the right investor for everybody. But if you've done the homework and you realize that it's actually the ideal investor, great. It should be a great partnership from there.
Okay, and Ravi, maybe you can tell us what should a business plan actually include?
I'm a numbers guy, right? So for me, I always like to start with the numbers and see if they add up. How is this business going to make money? And actually, when we're talking about business plans, we're really talking about very early stage companies. Essentially, all those things at the idea stage, right? Because the further away you are from the idea stage, the less the actual plan matters. Because everybody knows that, it's very rare that you would have the same plan even 6 months after starting a business. It would, things evolve very rapidly as you actually put your ideas into practice and you start building a business. But I do deals from just across the spectrum. I have no limits on how early or how late. So for me, it really depends on, the business plan really comes into play with very early stage businesses, because what that tells me is that the management team has spent some time polishing. And if they're good at polishing their plan and their presentation, it probably means they're good at polishing their product and selling ultimately to, first they're selling to investors, then they're selling to consumers and to clients, right? So if they can't sell to investors, they're probably not going to be good at selling to their clients. So I look at it from that standpoint. In other words, a business plan is necessary but not sufficient. Piece of information that you use to decide whether to invest.
Actually, I disagree with that, if I can just pipe in there. I've known of entrepreneurs, I won't name them obviously, who are great at selling to investors and not good at delivering value ultimately to investors. I've seen guys who've cycled through 3-4 times, raising money for the same company.
Would you do the reverse?
Actually, occasionally you do come across a reverse. Guys who can get consumers or customers of some sort on board, but are not able to raise money for whatever reason. Perfectly valid.
Please send them my way.
What about yourself? What would you say an entrepreneur should definitely not include in their business plan?
Don't put your family snaps, your mom, dad, kids, just, doesn't humor us. And, it's so textbook, right? I mean, they teach in business schools that you need to set up an emotional connection with the person on the other side. You come aboard with presentations that start with family slides. Jokes apart, I think essentially, rather than, let me answer it separately, differently. What we try and understand, I think everybody, and at varied degrees of interest, we try and understand your thought process. We try and understand how you think about problems, how you think about solutions, how you think about challenges, and any opportunity you have in a business plan, whether it is how you go about showing your expense report, or how do you show the breakdown of revenues that you're going to get, or how do you, how are you sharing your journey with us. All those things are opportunities for us to start understanding you better. And it kind of goes back to William's presentation, which, by the way, stole my thunder, is that eventually it's about chemistry. At very early stages, it's about trying to understand who you are and how you're going to go about doing this. So I think more or less it's about, don't put anything which is just for the sake of being put there. Try and help us understand why it is there, how you've arrived at that. And that's more important than just putting any numbers like Ravi wants to see. For us, it's more important to see what's thinking behind the numbers.
Would you agree with Sanjeev that it should be limited to around 2 pages or 3 pages? Because typical textbooks tell you it should be about 20-25 pages long. So what's your preference?
I completely agree with Sanjeev, and I think as an investor, as a very early stage investor, and I don't know, and I'll let these guys jump in on this or kind of beat me on it, but I think we take a gut call in the first meeting. And beyond that, it's about either finding reasons to not do it or finding more reasons to do it. But the gut call happens usually in the first meeting. So nobody reads the 25 pages.
I would say in the first 7 minutes.
Yeah, so, and that's probably the 2-pager. So you don't need 25 pages.
Okay, so let's talk about reaching out to you. So, it's always a founder's dream to bump into, an investor that you can do your 30 seconds pitch to. But what's the best way to reach out to investors? Be it early stage investors, late stage investors. Should we just pick up the phone, call you guys, email you, meet you at events like this, and just hound you and stalk you? What should we do? How do we reach out to you guys?
First of all, I think if you don't need to raise money, that's the best position to be in, right? Yeah. So if you don't need to raise money, that's great. But if you need to raise money, my advice is fundraising is actually a full-time job. It takes away, it distracts from what you really want to do, and it can drag on for months, maybe even years in some cases. So my advice is to aspiring entrepreneurs is to set aside, 3 or 4 hours a day towards fundraising for a fixed period of 3 months or 6 months, and to use that time to really research very well who are the right investors to approach. I get proposals from biotech. We've never done a biotech investment. If someone looks at our website, sees the companies we've invested in, they would get a pretty good idea that Specturm invests in the companies you saw that William put up. It's web-based businesses, so I think it's really important to spend some time researching who are the right investors to target. And the way to approach them is to send a simple 2-page professional email. Usually most of these investors have a contact address where you can send in the email. If there's a secretary, send it into the secretary. It's then circulated to the partners, and then wait for a response. If you don't get a response, maybe send one reminder 2 weeks later, or give them a call, and that's it. Just leave it at that. So do a targeted, approach rather than sending out emails to hundreds of people. Try to understand what businesses these particular shops are investing in, and then at the end of the day, there aren't more than 8 or 10 shops in Singapore. And if you want to expand your search to the valley as well, I don't know, maybe you'll find 8 or 10 shops that invest in the kind of business that you are doing. Maybe it's e-commerce store, and you'll find a few shops specializing investing in e-commerce stores. So why bother contacting others? I think that time would be much better and well spent.
Amit, would you agree with this as well?
I think broadly, of course, all of that makes sense. I think one of the things I would like to kind of, again, stress upon is the stage at which you are versus the kind of investors you should look for. I think that's probably the most common, I wouldn't say mistake, but probably unknown factor about fundraising is, what guy is right for what stage. And even before that, what is the amount of money I should be raising? I see so many plans which are, just overcapitalized because everybody's raising $500,000. I'm going to raise $500,000 because there is this program that gives me $500,000. So I'll go and approach this for $500,000, and they don't understand, how this is going to evolve over many, many rounds of fundraising. And so I would suggest, just try and understanding the various stages of fundraising is something that all of us as an ecosystem should start doing more about. I think about reaching, I think all of us are very accessible, and we always try to become more accessible. Sometimes we appear not to be accessible because of the facts that Sanjeev mentioned. It's just our space, we're just too occupied with what we are, already have in our hand. Shit hits the roof all the time, so yeah.
Okay, what about yourself, Ravi? Do you have any interesting stories that you can share with us about founders reaching out to you in a very unexpected manner?
I see close to 100 deals every year.
Okay.
And I've invested maybe 4. So I think if you're in the pipeline, if you're just out there and you don't mind being approached, and people will approach you, because I think part of it is that a lot of people use me more to just get feedback on the business. And that's not a bad way of doing it. I mean, it puts a bit of pressure on me sometimes, but I still welcome it. I don't mind. If an entrepreneur comes to me and says, look, this is what we're doing, what do you think? So it's not so much an investment approach as more of a feedback, more of a mentorship. I mean, there's various organizations in Singapore, Bansi, which Amit is the vice chairman of, it's one of the Thai chair is one of them, where we actually offer mentorship. If entrepreneurs want to just go through that process, just sit with an experienced investor or an entrepreneur and say, here's my plan, what do you think? And I think Singapore is very good at that. There's plenty of resources available if entrepreneurs are looking for someone to help them. So I would not just go and straight away ask people for money. I would first get some informal feedback, preferably from a number of people, so that you can at least refine your pitch based on feedback, and then you're just that much better at.
So there's a lot of resources available for early stage investment, but for slightly later stage investments, there are not that many, mentorship programs or places that an entrepreneur can go. So Murli, what would you advise them to do? And also, what's the best way to reach out to you?
Two very different questions. So I'll just take the second one about reaching out. Actually, it's a cliche, but people always tell you it's good to be introduced to an investor. And I'm not speaking for anybody else here, but certainly for my case, that's very useful. Mainly because this is going to sound weird, but for a technology VC, our spam filter is overactive. A lot of our emails end up in spam. I just don't ever see them. Or occasionally we'll get emails, and I've got 70 emails in the past 5 hours, and I just would have missed yours. So very often it does help if somebody I know has introduced or called me up, or when I met him for a drink, William talks about a certain deal. Yeah, of course, I'll hear about it. So it's a bit of a cliche that, getting an introduction is useful, but it's actually a cliche for a reason. It works, right? Your other question was regarding mentorship. So for later stage companies, and actually I don't really call them later stage, I would say anywhere from 0 to 20 million is still relatively early stage company. But yeah, at the stage of $100,000 versus $5 million, it's a very different company. I agree with you there. Obviously, one good way to kind of get mentorship or get advice is to raise money from the right investor. But that's not the only way. As Sanjeev said, the best is if you don't raise money. I often tell entrepreneurs, why are you raising money? Go do it on your own. I mean, you can make a lot more money that way. So if you do it on your own, or if you're not able to raise money, or whatever the case may be, then you can go look for independent board members. You can go look for independent, you can create a board of advisors. You can go and talk to other entrepreneurs who've been in the same space as you, right? It doesn't have to be identical. You might be doing something that really is brand new, but doesn't mean that somebody with expertise in finance in a different domain can't also help you in your finance function, or in go-to-market, or in whatever, team management.
Right. Okay, so before I open it up to the floor, I'm just going to end up with, so you said that you're an emotional investor. So they say opposites attract. So would you like an entrepreneur who is pragmatic and unemotional?
Yeah, when I said emotional, it doesn't mean I should fall in love with the investor. I think what I meant was, for me, especially William's slide about good karma, that is probably the most important slide for me. And shared values, common goals, making sure we're on the same page, we can work together. I can work with this guy. And I think very often what happens is entrepreneurs look at investors, they try to manage the investor. And I always tell companies that I'm working with, please don't manage me. Just as people try to manage a boss. I'm your partner, for God's sake. I put money into your company. If you're having a problem, I'm having the problem because our destinies are tied. So, but it's very difficult sometimes to break through that, because entrepreneurs want to manage the investor. They, just like you want to tell your boss only the good news, not the bad news. You want to manage the boss. That's a problem. So for me, I really, really appreciate when entrepreneurs share everything and they look at the investor as a partner as opposed to an investor. So that, for me, that's what I mean by emotion.
Right. So what about yourself, Ravi? What would be the one quality you're looking for in an entrepreneur?
Aggression. I mean, I think we were talking about it earlier, but that really is what makes it. because your people have to be almost relentless, almost they should have this gene for shame turned off to some extent. Just they don't take no for an answer. These are the kind of people who will work the room and they'll sign up half a dozen of you, and they don't mind getting 90 rejections. Those are the people who inevitably win, right? Now, that's not the only kind of people who win, but those people inevitably win. But when you find people like that, you always invest. And then,
Fantastic. What about Murli?
So somewhat similar, but I would say I would word it as think big, dream big, but plan for whatever needs to be done to make that big dream come true. I make the standard joke about how sometimes people come to me and say, I'm paraphrasing, this is not what somebody actually said. I want to be the biggest bubble tea vendor in Jurong. Well, good for you, but it's not a VC fundable proposition, right? You've got 1 billion consumers around you, go out and explore that market. If it's really bubble tea that excites you, great, but do it for a larger audience if you want to talk to a VC. If you want to build a lifestyle business, well, it's a perfectly valid lifestyle choice. Great, in fact. Got the independence and everything, but it's not a VC fundable sort of proposition.
And Amit, your work?
So sitting here is easy, right? I can say all of the above. But I think one more thing, just to kind of cap it off, and this is we always try and enable this, is we love entrepreneurs who walk in with their guards down, because that's when you truly get to know the person. As soon as your guards are up, everything starts to become a downward spiral, whether it is whether it's a discussion about competition or it's about team building, it just goes out. So when the guard is down, you don't have an agenda, I don't have an agenda. That's when the best relationships come out. So we like to see entrepreneurs come with guards down and have a good chat.
Fantastic. Okay, so to open up to the audience, does anyone have any question? Yes, sir.
My name is Ravi. Thanks for this discussion. That's very good information that you're giving. So I've been introduced into. I've been an entrepreneur. I've run a couple of restaurants, closed them all, and I had a great business and all that. So about 8 weeks back, for me, the first time somebody introduced me about funding, they actually told me about that you can actually get fund from somebody. Until that time, I thought angels wore white dress and VC was the short form for VC++ because I'm a VC++ programmer myself. So I've been, after he introduced that to me, I've been going through a crash course for 8 weeks, reading both sides of the table, Mark Suster, and buying all sorts of books, how to impress and venture capitalists and all that, yeah. So there is a frustration in me. I know that it's going to work, yeah. Whatever I have, it's working. I have a working model. I have put a lot of money in there. And then if it's all about a formula of how to crack GRE or GMAT, it's almost like I'm thinking, from my school days, I'm thinking how to crack IIT JEE, how to crack GMAT, GRE. It's going to that level. Don't you think if somebody gets that formula right, you're going to get fooled sitting on the other side of the table, yeah? So will you guys get fooled by somebody like Murli said, that he has seen so many people who are very good in pitching, just about pitching, and then putting all that you said together, if I create a formula and then present it in front of you, very emotionally, right? Unpassionate, right? And all the words you said, if I put that formula in front of you, you're going to get fooled about it, right? So, how do we actually get this balance right? Get the right people out there who have the right things in them, have a great business plan which is going to make money, right? And then how do you strike the balance between these two?
Look, I mean, that's an excellent question, right? The short answer is that I get fooled all the time. It's a numbers game, right? At the moment I have 11 deals, and 2 of them are not doing well, and the other 9 are so far doing well. And because we get fooled by many things. I mean, life is not without risk, and when you're taking investment risk, your expectation is that lots of things can go wrong, right? The only thing you can hope to do is eliminate the obvious things, which are just pattern recognition. If you invest long enough, you meet the guys who are just talking and who are not going to put in the effort. And occasionally you'll come across people who are passionate and who are going to put in the effort, but you know that what they're doing is not going to work, or very low odds of it working, but they're going to do it anyway because that's what they're passionate about. And you wish them well, but you don't want to put your money behind them, because I'm in it for the money, not to support someone's passion. And so there's lots of ways of getting fooled, and the future will fool you, in so many ways, right? If you don't cross the road properly, you get fooled by a bus. I think this is a business where it's not putting money in the bank, and you just take that on board. So I don't think there's a formula. I just think every deal is different. I've been dying to tell this anecdote. Last year, Amit and I did a deal earlier this year. It was an animation company, right? And I didn't look at the business plan. I saw the deck and all that. It was reasonably established. All I did was I took a CD. They have a show on Disney Junior, right? So they gave me a CD with 5 episodes of the show called Rob the Robot. I took it home and I made my kids and my nephews watch it. And after the 3rd episode, these guys were actually dancing to the opening music, and I knew this was a winning show, right? And I literally invested on that basis, and it's doing well. But every time the actual criteria that makes you write the check is something different.
Just to kind of jump in, and that's why I said learning, because we as investors are always learning as well. So don't let any of us fool you that we know anything. Eventually you know best, and it will come down to how best you will be able to bring us on the other side of the table to understand your perspective on that solution. And sometimes we will, one of us will not see it, the other one may see it. So, and that's about the persistence angle. So again, we are all learning and we keep learning all the time. There is no magic to this.
We have time for one more question. So, right, gentleman on side.
Hi, my name is Nara. I'm from IDA Singapore. It's a government agency which also supports some form of assistance for startups. So we'll be happy to have you gentlemen as part of our list to introduce potential startups.
You also go to him first.
My question is, there have been several comments, even as recent as last month in a fast company, that the culture here doesn't support entrepreneurial risk-taking. So it's not a good scene. Singapore is not a good base for startups, and the angel investors are also very wary of taking the risk. So do you, agree with this view that Singapore doesn't tolerate failure, and hence, it's not a good base for startups? Thank you.
I think the Singapore startup scene is in its infancy. It's kind of like where Silicon Valley was in the early 70s. So I think the judgment is far too early. There are angel investors, there are entrepreneurs. We've seen a few success stories in Singapore. Not many. Property Guru is one of the largest success stories. I don't know, has there been any other 100 million plus exit? I think that's the only one really. So I think these are very early days. I mean, Singapore has to mature. But having said that, I think it's a great place to start a business. The ecosystem is developing, and really in this business, your market is the world, and there's connections between Singapore and the Valley, also developing connections between Singapore and India. So I think Singapore is the right place if you happen to be here, and it's in the early days, still very early days.
Nothing really substantive to add except one little sort of, well, you could say it's a joke, but it's kind of true as well. A couple of months ago, I was speaking at an NUS event, and somehow this topic came up. I don't know why. I actually don't think Singapore is at its infancy. This is like the 3rd or the 4th, I would say, VC cycle that Singapore has been through. The first was probably in sort of the mid-80s when it wasn't really even called VC. before even Visual C++. But my point is that I think some of the points that you make, especially given that you're yourself working for the government, are there is some truth in that. The joke that I made at the conference last 2 months ago was every fresh graduate, when he kind of graduates, he'll go tell his parents, his or her parents, I want to go work for a bank. And the usual parent response would probably be, why do you want to do that? Why don't you go work for the government? Right? So I think that attitude, I think slowly, it's going away, as Sanjeev also kind of alluded to. There is, I think, much more startup activity than I've seen in the past, 2-3 years even, compared to 10 years ago. Even the dot-com boom, there were, I think, several companies, but I think there are many more sustainable sort of companies that I'm seeing today compared to even 12 years ago. So I think all in all, we're going in the right direction, maybe. Progress is, though, still somewhat slow.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, panelists, for the insightful sharing. It's my pleasure now to invite Dr. Iftikhar Chowdhury, Senior Research Fellow at ISAS, to present tokens of appreciation to our panelists. Dr. Chowdhury, please. Roshni. Sanjeev. Ravi. Murli. Last but not least, Amit. Thank you, Dr. Chowdhury and panelists.